Parsons is a minor character in George Orwell's 1984, a somewhat semi-comical, if ultimately tragic figure that, despite his near-complete obeisance to the party, yet falls into the merciless hands of the Fort Police, his ultimate fate remaining unclear. But who is Parsons? Welcome to 1984 lore, and today we take a deeper dive into another minor character of the novel, Winston's unlikable and sweaty acquaintance. Parsons is fully named Tom or Thomas Parsons. He lives in the same building, Victory Mansions, as Winston, along with his wife and 2 children. Parsons also works in the same general building as Winston, the Ministry of Truth. However, though similarly employed in the general task of providing information for both the party and proles, Winston notes that Parsons, quote, was employed in some subordinate post for which intelligence was not required. We can assume from this that Parsons was at least not trusted with tasks similar to Winston in rectifying past documents to conform to the current party truth, since such tasks required a degree of intelligence and a knowledge of the principles of INGSOC that was likely simply beyond Parsons. Parsons is interesting in that he functions as a foil to Winston. He is described by Winston, quote, as a fattish but active man of paralysing stupidity, a mass of imbecile enthusiasms, one of those completely unquestioning, devoted drudges on whom, more even than on the Fort Police, the stability of the party depended. We see this evidenced throughout the story. Parsons is, for example, unquestionably happy at the Ministry of Plenty's announcements in the canteen scene, while also sullenly requesting from Winston any spare razor blades he may have. Parsons is outwardly an energetic, typical party member, unthinking and unquestioning of the dreary reality of his life under the dominion of the party, though much of his attitude is clearly marked, as with most party members in the society, with a pervasive fear that always colours his conduct. Winston notes several times that Parsons is always accompanied or preceded by an intense odour of sweat. This stench preceded his later arrival in the Ministry of Love, and Winston could always tell if Parsons had recently been playing table tennis at the community centre, given the dampness of the bat handle. Though he is certainly an active man, a leading member of all the committees dedicated to organising spontaneous demonstrations, hiking trips, sports and the like, his extraordinary powers of sweating were likely also symptomatic of the man's intense anxiety. In contrast to Winston, who suffers intellectually with the questions of the mutability of the past and the nature of his society, among other issues, Parsons appears to suffer in his own way. Though on the surface throughout the book he appears the dutiful, energetic drudge, this may not be the whole truth about him. Winston surmises that he has little understanding of the nuances of party doctrine. Winston doubts, for example, that Parsons can actually follow the economic figures being spurted out by the telescreen during the canteen scene. However, it's clear by the novel's end that an intense emotional struggle rages within this humble party member, despite his apparent lack of intellectual clarity. His inner struggle is manifested to an extent in his personal environment, though much of this can be chalked down to the presence of his unruly children too. The state of his large dwelling perhaps gives us some insight into the inner life of this nervous and rather pathetic man. Quote, the Parsons flat had a battered, trampled on look, as though the place had just been visited by some large violent animal. Games impedimenta, hockey sticks, boxing gloves, a burst football, a pair of sweaty shorts turned inside out, lay all over the floor, and on the table there was a litter of dirty dishes and dog-eared exercise books. Despite his unlikable and anxious manner, Parsons does seem to genuinely love his children, both of whom are typically unruly and enthusiastic members of the Spies. He fully encourages their indulgence in the training of the organisation. infamously recounting how his daughter had broken off from her group whilst on a hike with two other girls to tail a strange-looking man. Supposing he was some enemy agent, given he wore strange shoes, the Parsons girl gave up the man to the patrols in Amersham. The man was presumably arrested and likely executed. Parsons also eerily foreshadows the likely means by which his own fate was eventually sealed, proudly describing how the same little daughter was gifted an ear trumpet with which to listen at doors for suspicious chatter. Finally, he cheerfully tells Winston and Syme about a time his children set fire to a woman for wrapping sausages in a newspaper with the image of BB, the kids burning her quite badly. Though no overt information is provided on the exact relationship between Tom and his wife, there does seem to be some affection between them. This may seem obvious to state in our normal world, however we must remember that in Oceania, married couples are not required to like each other. Indeed, it's actually preferred they're either indifferent or worse. As Winston notes on marriage in general, special committees oversaw the coupling of men and women for marriage, and in such cases where the couple showed any sign of being physically attracted to one another, the union was always blocked. This is mainly due to the parties' jealous monopolization of both love and energy for just Big Brother and itself. Any loyalty or love outside of loyalty and love to it and BB is to be destroyed, or failing that, severely restricted and bent towards service to the party. In the case of marriage, couples merely wed to produce children for service to the party, and that's all. We can theorise from this general policy then that Tom and his wife began their marriage amicably, if not through some love match. However, given the brief statements we do have, we can deduce that there is some affection there. She does praise Tom as being very good with his hands, assuring Winston fondly that, if he were home, he would mend the blocked pipe quickly. Overall then, Tom Parsons is a typical outer party member, just competent enough to be useful in his small way in maintaining the overall stability of the party. Yet, under the surface, he was a man struggling emotionally with his laborious existence under party rule. I believe we can safely assume this, given what eventually happens. Winston is assured earlier in part 1 that Parsons, along with the beetle-like men of the ministries and the quacking man nearby, that he would never be vaporized, while himself, Syme, and O'Brien would be. However, Parsons' appearance in Winston's cell later on genuinely shocks him. Parsons, it's interesting to note, shows neither interest nor surprise in Winston's presence, which indicates he may not have been totally mindless after all, perhaps always suspecting Winston's own unorthodox nature. Parsons, it seems, had his own streak of defiance hidden deep within, and was overheard by his own daughter as he slept. After hearing her father blurt out, "Down with Big Brother," in his sleep, he was denounced to the Fort Police and hauled into the Ministry of Love the following morning. It would, I think though, be a stretch to suggest that Parsons was any kind of serious rebel on any level to say Winston or Julia. His outburst was likely symptomatic of a deep inner and subconscious struggle with his life in his society. The party is to some degree aware of such emotional struggles within its members, hence its ceremonies like the public executions, the 2 minutes hate and hate week, where such people can direct this pent-up negative energy outward rather than towards them. Parsons superficially remained invertebrate in the cell with Winston, still staunchly supportive of the party who would now perhaps execute him after a relatively short stay in the Ministry of Love. Sadly, Parsons at least outwardly expresses no ill will towards his own daughter, though under the gaze of the telescreens this may not mean much, given any condemnation of her could be seen as simply compounding his crimes. Parsons' ultimate fate is unknown. However, I think, given his personality and mental state, we can reasonably conclude his fate was relatively tame, compared to, say, Winston's. This is because not all thought criminals are necessarily equal. As we noted in a previous video on the fate of Winston's other acquaintance, Syme, Parsons would not be a hard case, if any case at all, for the thought police to handle. Winston's arrest and ordeal was to an extent exceptional, O'Brien himself stating Winston was a difficult case. Winston had much wrong with him intellectually, whereas the likes of Syme and Parsons were intellectually, in different ways, quite orthodox. Since there were no reasons to break either man, it's likely, as with Syme, Parsons was at worst executed fairly quickly, his love of Big Brother quickly re-established, and perhaps, at best, as he hoped, he was put to work in a labour camp. Of course, we can never truly know. What do you think? Was Parsons subjected to the full rigours of reintegration in the Ministry of Love? Did he truly hate Big Brother? Let us all know in the comments, and remember, Big Brother is watching you.